Mic check, mic check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Y'all, this is exciting. Welcome to this episode of that was good.
Yeah.
Welcome to this episode of Off the Grid. I'm your host Mitchell Napper, and I said what I said, and I meant it. Did we caught that on these two, right? I said what I said, and I meant it. Just in case I missed this camera right here, so that people know, I said it with my chest, and I meant it with everything that I said from my chest. I'm excited for this episode, right? And you want to know why? Because I have one of my favorite people next to me right now, Christian Whitley.
Yay.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm living life grandioso, and then I'm just like, can't complain. So I'm doing good overall.
My guy is out here living like Larry. Okay. My guy is out here living like Larry. So tell the people what you do.
Well, by trade, I'm a musician. I work at a church, and been bouncing around with the music scene here and there, and now I'm just like choosing my own endeavors, figuring out how to take my artistry to the next level. So
He's the best to ever do it. In my opinion. Best to ever do it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me. Okay, so let's get into this. So what does stigma look like to you? Or like if you had to give it a definition or give it a phrase, what does it look like to you? And when it comes to mental health, what do you think that one stigma has been?
Stigma, usually, like when I hear the word, it's really associated with like a negative perception that's commonly accepted. So like a stigma of certain stereotypes or a stigma of something that's generally accepted as bad. It's just something that's just like has an identity, but sometimes the stigma is also a false narrative. So it's like it's something that could be easily accepted or understood, but it's actually not true. So that's actually the biggest difference that separates stigma from just stereotypes. It's like it's generally accepted that it's just not true. It's a false, conception of or idea of something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And remind me of the second part, because I know it was a two-sided question.
When it comes to mental health, what do you think?
Mental health. People think the stigma with mental health is like if you acknowledge that you have some problems with mental health and overall mental quality, they think you're in the nut house, you're in the crazy house. It's just like, oh, like I gotta, talk to a doctor or talk to a therapist constantly every, 24 hours. And then like if something's wrong, oh, I just need a moment to myself. And it's generally accepted that when people say that and they are very vocal about it, it's like, oh, let's just stay away from that person. In the common sense of like, oh, something's wrong with that person. If somebody's sick, I'm not well, then it's like, oh, stay away. But if somebody says I'm mentally not well or I'm mentally sick, I don't really like the label of that, but if I'm mentally not well, it's the same accepted pretense of like, stay away. And usually the stigma with mental health is like, you got to leave them for the professionals. When it's like, no, like everybody has to deal with mental health in some capacity. Mm-hmm. So something that is not talked about often, but should be generally accepted by the public in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Do you think do you think the public would be afraid to accept it? Or do you think it's just new? Like not new, but new essentially. Like this is not something because mental health is not something that, generally has been taken this seriously now.
Yeah. I forgot who talked about it recently, but it's just like, it's kind of going back in time a little bit. It was generally accepted that whatever personal problems you have, if it's mentally, whatever have you, they just stay in the house. If whatever happens in the house stays in the house. It's like that kind of old school thinking is what life used to be like. So generally people have this concept of like, all right, if it's a personal problem, I'm not going to talk about it because I'm in this social setting and, whatever's personally going on, I won't generally talk about it. But usually what happens on a personal side of life and personal side of things generally can kind of creep in its way towards, just regular day-to-day stuff. Mm-hmm. So when people usually try to keep it under wraps because it's just like, oh, something's going on. Let's just leave them to their own, let's leave them on their own and just like let them worry about them because like we don't need that over here in this public setting. And usually it's not really beneficial to everyday life. remind me the second. I know I'm thinking a lot because it's just like help how to navigate this whole like life journey. I'm reliving these kind of concepts to just make sure I'm aware of like mental health and things like that. So just remind me again because my brain is all over the place.
So where I aim to go with this is, first of all, let's look at how much of it, because now I feel like we're progressing, right? I feel like I said earlier, it's taken much more seriously. So we have a lot more of the practices of the professionals in more public spaces.
I'll say like the pandemic kind of like put that at the forefront.
But that's true though,
because
everybody had to deal with it.
Yeah, everybody was at home. You couldn't really go outside. So I feel like because we're in not saying post-pandemic, we're still in a pandemic technically, but to now understand like how mental health deals with our day-to-day, because our day-to-day used to be in the pandemic just right there in front of us. We had to work from home. We had to deal with personal stuff at home. We resolved at home. So
it's all at home.
Yeah. So it's definitely something that needs to be addressed now in everyday life.
But I mean, I guess what I would ask is why did it take us this long?
It's like that proverbial mirror. Again, the pandemic kind of like forced us to look at everything in the mirror because we didn't have outside to distract us. We had to deal with everything inside. And it didn't, like something as monumental as a pandemic. Sometimes it takes something like that. People like, imagine people who go to work every day, they are usually allotted, 8 hours per their day to distract themselves from work, and then you have 8 hours for sleep. So that other 8 hours you can try to distract yourself with having fun, going out, doing social stuff. It's just like there's always little things that can take your mind off of you in that proverbial mirror when you have to look in the mirror. But with that with the pandemic, it's just like, all right, it's now right here. I gotta look at it every day. So it's, to be honest, it's a good thing that people are now taking the time to address mental health, because overall, once you look at that, it's kind of like that. You fill your own cup with positive thinking. You make sure your mental health needs are met. And once you understand that, okay, I've got all these things in check, your people will start to see that the quality of life is really like progressing after that. Like, so just taking care of your own self can then in turn help other things become to grow and become better.
Nice. So with that being said, with the aspect of now, like we're all back. We've been back for, quite some time now. It's not necessarily over. We're not necessarily out of the pandemic yet. Wear y'all masks, please.
Especially in public settings.
Large
crowds.
Wear y'all masks, please. Because some of y'all be coughing, and it don't just be no regular cough. It be one of them old from the belly war cries that y'all be letting out.
The one that rumbles the room, that's what gets me. I'm just like, oh,
first of all, the one that like rumbles the chest a little bit. You're like, no, not like, you, baby. Get to the back.
That kind of like what I was talking about earlier. Like, oh, stay away. Like, no, because then you feel it all in the chest. It's like,
yeah. Get somebody else to do that. But
oh my god.
So, I guess what I'm trying to figure out, like, now that we're all back, we're now back in the social setting. We're kind of fairly back into the swing of things, right? People are put back in their positions, specifically leadership roles, specifically those who lead something, whether it be a big or small organization. Now we look at the forefront is that leaders need leaders too.
That is good.
So I feel like, and this is what I feel like, is that, we're back, we're finally, and because it's progressing, now we all have a sense of what's going on with us. But now that we're back, we still got to do our job, or we still got to lead.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm a church kid, and you know this, and
exactly.
You're also a very church kid. So we can go with.
Not technically a PK. I'm a minister's kid, but
Ministers' kids still count as
they count.
Ministers' kids count as
exactly.
I mean, especially if your dad, did he preach or did he just?
No, he's a minister of music, so technically a minister, but did raised in church for 40 years and have that whole church upbringing. So I understand, like the
church terminology.
Exactly.
Church terminology. Can we address some of that is actually really toxic. Different conversation for a different day. That's a whole different thing. But now we're back, right? Leaders from the secular to the sacred is how I differentiate the two. Mm-hmm. Now that we've realized that, like I said, leaders need leaders too. And what do we do for the leaders that get so distracted with leading is that they forget to take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. Because that's a very real possibility, to be a leader and get so like caught up in what you got to do and where you got to go and who you got to be in front of and who you have to counsel, be it if you are in that kind of role, like who you have to counsel and what you have to do, that you forget that you're running empty. And you forget that you're losing it. Mm-hmm. And you don't realize you're losing it until you realize that, I don't know what it is about it, but when you go to try and be something for somebody and you haven't really been there for yourself, you start to realize that you can only give and do but so much. Mm-hmm. And then you feel like, and maybe this is just me, and I wonder if this is me just being in my own head, but like you start to realize that maybe I can't give this much because I only have so much. And it's also like maybe my advice is not, or my whatever, maybe my leadership is not doing what it's supposed to do.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I guess what would you say to leaders that, or how would we address it first?
It's funny. I would say the past 4 months, I've kind of actually been in that position where it's like, okay, I'm quote unquote a leader at a church, mm-hmm. Formally at a school, just doing schoolwork and things like that. And it was to the point about two months where I was like, okay, something's different. Like when I stand up in front of the class, and actually when at the school, and then when I was standing up in front of my ministry at the church, it's like, okay, like I'm here, but I'm also not present. And there was a very distinct moment where I was like, okay, kind of like when people talk about the cup full, cup empty, mm-hmm. I just felt that my cup was empty, and I need to be able to have a full cup to run a department, whether at church, whether at school. And there was a moment where I could start to tell, like, okay, like I can't give my all, and thus it's making my departments in both those fields not perform as well. So there was a moment where I had to be like, okay, I can acknowledge that right now I'm not being an effective leader, but I need to figure out who do I look to quote unquote get inspiration. If it's a pastor, whose sermon can I kind of pour back into myself? Because for me, I forgot who said it, but great leaders are also great listeners and great followers, because they understand what it's like to be on both sides. If you can lead people, then you know where you're going. As far as like, well, first let me say this. If you were a follower, you know how to be led. You know how to understand what it takes to be a leader. And then when you lead people, you understand what followers are looking for, or how to direct people. So to be in a space where it's like, okay, I'm not being the best leader. One, who can I entrust to instill the leaderships in me and then follow their lead so that I can in turn pour back into them. So that was the biggest emphasis of, understanding the dynamics between the two sides of how to be an effective leader, but then also how to take time for myself. It's really just, in a way, not putting a pause, because people who are quote unquote followers and who have to follow your lead, they don't want somebody who's not leading. Like, you have to be in the forefront at all times. But at the same time, it's like you have to put a pause for a second, figure out if they can do the things that they need to do on their own for a brief minute, and then figure out new concepts, try to evolve essentially. Mm-hmm. So try to evolve and then figure out new ways to instill in yourself, and then also be an effective leader in that sense.
But what do we say though to leaders who are afraid to admit that they need help? Because it's a twofolded thing.
Yeah.
Because you can need help and mm-hmm. admit it, but there are some leaders who their job is their distraction. Mm-hmm. And their job is the reason why they haven't lost it yet. some of them, their job is the reason why they haven't lost it yet.
Part of it goes back to that crucial moment of being able to pause. If you feel like you cannot pause in your leadership, I'm hesitant to say this, but you're kind of not leading the right way. An effective leaders can teach people, can get basically the wheels turning and stuff like that, and then they don't have to do anything. If they can put a little bit of trust is a key word, into their whatever they're leading and let it function on its own, you've taught people well. For me, when it goes to the ministry that I led at my church, I can teach everybody all the concepts. I'm actually in charge of the streaming and stuff at my church and doing the whole production stuff. So for me, I teach them all how to do every station. And then on a Sunday, I don't touch anything because they are the ones that are, doing the work on a Sunday. But I'm doing the work Monday through Saturday. So the effectiveness of my leadership is being able to see the people that I follow, people who follow me can do their work well. And I don't have to butt in for lack of a better word.
But what I wonder, like, what causes leaders to do that, to like micromanage their, I have to be part of this, I have to do this, and you don't. But granted, we could say that that's their distraction, and that's why they micromanage.
Yeah, busy work and kind of like saying, just nitpicking at certain different things. It can take good distractions off of other things that's going on. But that's unhealthy. It's kind of going back to the mental health. It's very unhealthy you don't want to micromanage, because if you then start to micromanage, people are not going to really, accept that leadership, because it's just a weird thing about people have their own way of doing things, but still they are able to get the job done. So if you're meeting a goal, that should be it. You don't want to tell people how to do too much, because it's like if you micromanage certain people, it goes back to the effective leadership. People who, want to trust your leadership can still perform what they need to do, but
But that goes back to the importance of having a good team, though.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you can't say that your team is the best, and then when you leave, it falls apart. And then you also can't say your team is the best when your team doesn't do anything.
Exactly.
So it's a two-folded thing. But, and I have to ask this question too: how important is it for the followers to care for the leader? Where does that line go of how do I say this? Where does the line go when how do I put that? Yeah, we'll ask that question for right now,
okay,
and then we'll unpack it.
How do the quote unquote followers support the leader?
Do you have to acknowledge to your people hey, this is what the deal is?
Most of the time in the fields that I'm working in, the leader is very knowledgeable in what they're doing. And sometimes the quote unquote followers, they're learning. I take it back to the student teacher kind of roles, where the teacher is very knowledgeable and skilled in what they're doing. The student is very much like, I'm new at this, but I still want to learn. Ultimately, it goes down to the respect factor. If you're an effective leader, if you're effectively teaching your followers in how to do a certain tool, a certain task, or whatever have you, that in turn builds the respect, so that the follower can then support the leader in whatever direction they decide to go, whatever concept they're teaching. It's like, okay, I understand that you may want to do something new. You know more than I do. Let me learn from you. Ultimately, respect.
Mm-hmm. So, with the importance of a team, how important is it for team leader, whatever, whoever's building this organization, to hire a good team, essentially, to hire the people that can do the smaller tasks, or that can learn quickly, or pick up, or retain or comprehend what it is that they're being taught, what it is that they're learning, even from a teacher student aspect, or well teacher student aspect, yeah, but also like team leadership and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Well, one, when a leader is kind of leading a department, that leader needs to know all the necessary components to make the department run. I'm always thinking about like a grandfather clock, or like something where there's different pieces that make the clock work. So a leader needs to know the ins and outs of everything that, is needed to make it run. So in the aspect of like leading a department, you have necessary sections of the department. Take it from the school district, like who's our district CEO?
Dr. Sonia Santelises, CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools.
Santelises.
It took me a while too.
Santelises?
I'll admit that.
All right.
It took me a while too.
Dr. Santelises has to hire different, people to run the school district. So understanding, what are the different districts, because different districts needs different things. So understanding different aspects of what makes a district run. That person then has their specific realm to, know the ins and outs of their things. So the one effective way that a leader can be a good leader is putting people in place who understands what also is needed to make the whole grandfather clock, as my analogy, for it to run effectively. So putting people in place, making sure they know what is needed. And then that takes the pressure off of the main leader, because you don't have to micromanage. You don't have to have nitpick, do every small little things here and there. Because you are trusting people to help you run the department that you're leading. Knowing who's a good, effective leader also is who's a good, effective follower. Then you can trust your follower to be a leader. It's just, it funnels in from, the whole follower leader kind of.
Yeah, one thing I realize about a lot of departments and a lot of, things that people are leading is that it goes from the head down. Mm-hmm. So this leader has to be able to hire this leader, and those leader has to be able to have people in place to lead, under them, and then it becomes a well-oiled
machine. There we go.
How did I not? I was trying so hard. Did you see that?
It's okay.
Did you see that?
It's okay.
But it becomes a well-oiled machine to a point. But that's why I say I go back to being able to still care for your humanity. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of leaders, I feel like, do not understand their job from their actual character. I feel like they don't understand. Their title is different. Like, you have the title of whatever you do, doctor, to put it in the school district, or like department head or school, like whatever. But they don't understand that their job does not have to trickle to their everyday life. So how do you differentiate between the two? Because I feel like people have a problem doing that.
They do. Now, I'm a church kid, like we already established.
That was well established, like 10 minutes into the episode.
So for me, I already know, like, in my spirituality, God does not care the titles that I have, because that just does not matter at the end of the day in my ultimate reward. But taking that concept and taking it, secularly, exactly. It's hard, because technically certain people, when they get to higher positions, they've studied for this, they've trained for this, they have put a lot of personal hours into what they're doing.
But does that go into their character training though?
No.
Like their personhood, exactly. Their humanity.
It shouldn't technically, but sometimes it does. But the one thing that I would always suggest to everybody to try and differentiate those things is to do something completely different than what your job is. For me, I'm a musician by trade. I have done everything music related. But when I try to find time to unwind, I actually started to pick up bowling, fishing, literally something random that does not relate to anything, because that in a sense compartmentalize different aspects of my life, because I'm not tied to job. I'm not tied to certain, the training that I've been, even that's a part of my life, I'm not tied to that. But that's also a way to decompress, because the biggest thing about it is when work gets stressful, you need to find time to decompress. When, the everyday things that goes on in leadership gets kind of overwhelming, there needs to be a moment where you can decompress, because if you don't decompress, you're always wrapped up in work. So finding that way to, compartmentalize, what goes on at job, what goes on in leadership, but then also what just goes on in personal, is more of a healthy way to try and figure out, how to balance these different aspects of life, to be honest, because you can't have them all muddy up different things.
But what do we say to the people that that's all they know? Is their entire background of family or their entire background of everything, all they know is that everybody works and they come home with the same personality of being whatever they do?
To be honest, sometimes you can't tell them. You got to show them. There's a family member for me that is always wrapped up in work. It's funny because one time I tried to just talk to them just simply about everyday random stuff. They kind of tied it back into work, because actually that family member and I work together. So it took less of me saying, hey, you need to do this because it'll be good for you, and then just saying, hey, you want to come along to so and so, just as off of a whim. And they don't realize it takes them getting out of their bubble, their shells, or whatever have you, to understand that when you get a break from work, even though it might not be your own inclination to try and do so, once you do, you're going to realize, hey, this was refreshing. So again, sometimes you can't tell people, you just got to show them, and do it gracefully, because you just don't want to rip somebody out of their, comfort zone. Yeah, if they're not ready for it. But, trying to show them a different path. That's essentially what could be a benefit to that person.
So I guess my final question for that would be, we all understand that leaders need rest, right? We all understand that you have to rejuvenate, because it's not necessarily the leadership, it's the person.
Yep.
That you can do your job all day, but if you don't have the energy to do that job, then you won't be able to do that job effectively. We just talked about that. How important is it for, and I guess we hit this point already, because how important is it for leaders to be able to step away and rest and go do something completely different, or go to somewhere that has nothing to do with their job? Like, I know people who do stuff all over the nation, but when they rest, they go out the country to like some random place in Mexico and chill for like a week and come back a completely refreshed person.
The funny part is I'm planning the exact kind of concept. I'm actually planning a trip to Mexico pretty soon, probably March. So I understand fully.
I mean, you do stuff all over the country. Go out the country, because I wonder, like, I feel like if you go like to vacation at some point in the country, like, oh, I could go here and work. It's like, no, go to Mexico, get by some water, do something fun.
As you were talking, the one analogy that came to mind, I forgot again. I hear analogies all the time. I'll sometimes speak in analogies, but I never remember who says them. One person talked about, imagine somebody as an iPhone, like just a person as an iPhone. Usually, if you use the iPhone too much, the battery drains quickly, right? If you let it be what it is, it'll just work on its own. But there's always a point, no matter it be at 10 o'clock at night or a couple of days, you have to recharge it. And usually once you charge it, you leave it alone. Like, you just let it rest. So literally there is no aspect in just everyday life where rest is not. You charge your phones, you need gas to refuel a car. But when it comes to a person is not able to do, things on a consistent basis. You always have to recharge. You always have to rejuvenate. So I always say, who is it? Like, it would behoove of us, if I'm using that word correctly, sorry, grammar. If I'm using this word correctly, it would behoove us to not be in the same, not to take the same considerations as far as rejuvenating rest and recharge the same way as an iPhone, same way as a car, same way as literally a lot of different things. You always have to recharge, restore, and just let it be, because if you use it too much, it won't be as effective. So the importance of rest is to make sure that, okay, let this be this, let it compartmentalize this certain aspect, let it be that. I'm going to pay attention to that a different day, and then come back to it once the day resets. So literally, it's around us everywhere. The need to stop, rest, decompress. So humans need to do that too.
Leaders, tell you something. On behalf of people, producers, etc. at Off the Grid Podcast, we appreciate you, because I need you to understand that you are not your job.
No.
We don't need you to be your job.
No.
We need you to care for your person so you can lead correctly.
Yes.
We need you to care for your personhood and your humanity so that you can lead correctly. You can't lead if you're broken.
Ooh. Ooh. Touch this soul. Touch my soul.
You can't lead if you're hurt, because you'll hurt other people and wonder where they got hurt.
Cool.
Hate you. Hate you.
Speaking.
I'm not even going to look at you. I hate you. You cannot lead effectively if you do not have somebody leading you. You cannot lead effectively if you are not willing to follow your said leader. They're not your leader if you can't follow them.
That was good.
They're not your leader if you can't follow them. However, we appreciate you, just in case nobody tells you, because I know your job gets hard.
You are
and
loved.
I know your job sucks. And I know your job, sometimes you cry over your job. We appreciate you.
You're doing the best you can.
You are doing the best that you can. And we're proud of you.
It's okay to take a break sometimes.
It is very okay to take a break. And we need you to rest. For any tired leaders out there, you need to rest. Okay? You can't keep running yourself rampant for these people. I almost said a whole different word there.
Rampant.
Mighty. You can't keep running yourself rampant for these people and expect these people to get the full experience of you when you ain't got the full experience of yourself. Pull it together, please. We appreciate you. We love you. Bless you. Shout out to Inner Circle Legends for this episode. This was fun. This was really, really fun. Shout out to Mukad Media for producing this. Shout out to 1500 Radio for letting us hold this space, letting us be in this space, this lovely space. I really like being here, y'all. I really like being here.
This is nice. I like this. Yeah.
Yo, the first time I walked in here, why did I go, this is nice? I definitely did say it. I smell like roaches or nothing either.
Oh, my God.
I did. With no shame.
Oh, my God.
For more information, follow us on YouTube at City Schools TV, www.baltcityschools.org. Follow us on Instagram at Balt City Schools. Like us on Facebook, Baltimore City Public Schools. With that being said, these are your announcements. Govern yourselves accordingly.